Came to Memphis. I was reading a book on Elvis Presley, where he got started in the business through Sam Phillips of Sun Records, and I showed it to my dad.
Picture this: Mick Jagger, the eternal rock icon, standing in front of the cameras with a look of disbelief and simmering disapproval. The world is used to his confident swagger, his smirk that speaks volumes, but today there's something different, something darker. Today, he's finally opening up about Jerry Lee Lewis, and what he has to say sends shockwaves through the music world. The Rolling Stones frontman has had his fair share of scandals, feuds, and excess, but even he knows there are lines that should never be crossed. And in his eyes, Jerry Lee Lewis, rock and roll's original wild man, stomped right over him. This isn't just about musical rivalry or artistic clashes. This is about the darkness that followed Lewis like a storm cloud, the scandals, the violence, and the controversies that made him one of the most feared and unpredictable figures in music history. Long before the Rolling Stones shook up the world, Jerry Lee Lewis was already burning everything in his path. Known as the Killer, Lewis wasn't just a pianist with raw talent, he was a force of destruction. His performances were legendary, pounding the keys with manic energy, kicking over his piano bench, and sometimes even setting his instrument on fire. But the same chaotic energy that made him a rock legend also made him a dangerous man. Even in the early days of rock and roll, when excess was part of the game, Lewis was in a league of his own. His notorious temper and unpredictable behavior led to conflict with almost everyone who crossed his path. Musicians, producers, even his own family. No one was safe from his wrath. Think of the biggest scandals in rock history. Now, imagine a moment so shocking, so grotesque, that it nearly obliterated a man's career overnight. That's exactly what happened when the world discovered that Jerry Lee Lewis had married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. The revelation sent a wave of disgust and outrage across the globe, turning admiration into revulsion almost overnight. It wasn't just that she was young. It was the brazen way Lewis carried himself, as if he were untouchable. In 1958, as he prepared for what should have been a triumphant tour of England, the press got hold of the story, and the public erupted. Reporters hounded him, demanding answers, while furious fans turned their backs. Crowds that had once cheered for him now spat on his name. The same audiences that had screamed with excitement at his wild performances now jeered, seeing him not as a rock god, but as a pariah. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Radio stations banned his songs, concert venues canceled his shows, and record executives scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Lewis had once been at the forefront of rock and roll, an untouchable force of raw energy. But now, doors that had been wide open slammed shut in his face. The industry that had built him up was now tearing him down with the same intensity. But if anyone expected Jerry Lee Lewis to repent, they didn't know the man well enough. Instead of remorse, he exuded defiance.
I think they were just probably doing, I looked at the press was just doing the job that they thought they had to do.
He sneered at the outrage, refusing to apologize, standing firm in his belief that he had done nothing wrong. He dismissed the critics as hypocrites, insisted it was all part of his Southern upbringing, and carried himself as if he were the victim. His arrogance only made things worse. What should have been a career-defining tour turned into a public humiliation, a slow-mathig car crash that the whole world watched unfold. By the time the dust settled, Lewis had lost nearly everything. His career, once meteoric, was now in ruins. The man who had once set pianos on fire to roaring applause now found himself exiled from the rock and roll elite. His name, once synonymous with electric performances and reckless charm, was now a cautionary tale, a grim warning of how quickly the world could turn when the lines of morality were crossed. If Jerry Lee Lewis had been a man of peace, maybe he could have salvaged his reputation. But peace was never his way. He didn't just thrive on conflict. He craved it, fueled it, and embodied it. His life wasn't just riddled with feuds. It was an ongoing war, a never-ending battle against anyone who dared cross him. One of the most infamous clashes involved none other than Elvis Presley. Lewis never accepted Presley as the true king of rock and roll. In his eyes, there was only one king, and it was him. The resentment boiled for years until it reached a breaking point in 1976. Fueled by whiskey and unchecked arrogance, Lewis showed up at Graceland in the dead of night, gripping a loaded gun and demanding to see Elvis. The security team, well aware of Lewis's volatility, denied him entry, but the incident became legendary, proof that Lewis's jealousy and rage knew no bounds. It wasn't just a drunken mistake, it was a statement, a declaration of war against the man he saw as an undeserving pretender to his throne. But Presley wasn't the only target of Lewis's fury. His own bandmates suffered under his unpredictable wrath. He once fired a gun at his bassist for playing the wrong note, the bullet narrowly missing its mark. Another time, he erupted into a brutal fistfight with a promoter who refused to pay him up front, leaving the man battered and bloodied. His relationships with fellow musicians like Johnny Cash and Carl Perkins were not built on camaraderie, but on rivalry, distrust, and the ever-present threat of violence. To Lewis, every man was a challenger, and he met every challenge with unrelenting aggression. It wasn't just the music industry that felt the weight of Jerry Lee Lewis's destructive nature. His personal life was an unrelenting storm. 6 marriages, countless affairs, and a string of tragedies followed him throughout his life. He didn't just leave behind ex-wives, he left behind wreckage. Women who had endured his cruelty, his infidelities, his unpredictable rage. Some barely made it out, others weren't so lucky. After his infamous marriage to Myra, his next relationship spiraled into chaos. 2 of his wives met eerie, untimely deaths. One was found drowned in a swimming pool, her body still, her story unfinished. Another died under suspicious conditions in her home, whispers of foul play growing louder in the shadows. Though no charges were ever filed, the rumors swirled. Was Jerry Lee Lewis cursed? Or was he something much darker? Was he just a man surrounded by misfortune? Or did destruction follow him wherever he went? And then there were the losses that shattered what little humanity remained in him. His son, Steve Allen Lewis, drowned in a swimming pool at just 3 years old. An innocent life, gone in an instant. Another chapter in his ever-growing tragedy. Years later, another son, Jerry Lee Lewis Jr., was killed in a violent car crash. His future ripped away in the blink of an eye. With each death, with each moment of unbearable grief, Lewis seemed to descend deeper into the abyss. More alcohol, more violence, more recklessness. He didn't just mourn, he self-destructed. The world saw a man spiraling, but Jerry Lee Lewis, he saw a man who had nothing left to lose. Even in his later years, when most rock legends slow down, Jerry Lee Lewis refused to change. He lived with the same unrepentant rage that had defined his entire life. The world around him aged, mellowed, moved on, but not him. He still trashed hotel rooms as if he were 25, still carried guns like an outlaw expecting a showdown, still battled anyone who dared challenge him, whether they were a musician, a reporter, or a stranger who looked at him the wrong way. He wasn't just stuck in the past, he was defiantly clinging to it, refusing to bow to time, refusing to fade quietly like so many others. But time is merciless. It does not negotiate, not even with rock legends. As the years stretched on, the rebellion that once made him dangerous and electrifying now made him a relic. The same wild energy that once thrilled audiences had turned into a ghostly echo of a bygone era. The world no longer found his brand of chaos entertaining, it found it unsettling. The wild man, once adored for his unpredictability, became an uncomfortable reminder of an era when excess was excused, when destruction was just part of the game. His contemporaries had either cleaned up, slowed down, or faded away. Yet the killer remained, still snarling, still unwilling to apologize, still believing he was the only true rock and roll king. But there was something tragic in it now, a bitterness that clung to him like the smell of old cigarette smoke in a forgotten barroom. The crowds had shrunk, the adulation had faded. The industry that once celebrated him now barely tolerated his presence. He played smaller venues, dive bars, and outdated halls that had once been grand, but now felt like shrines to the past. The faces in the audience were different. Some were aging fans clinging to their youth. Others were new generations drawn more by curiosity than admiration. Some came to hear the music. Others came just to see if the legend would finally collapse under the weight of his own demons. His life had been one long, unrelenting war against everything. Authority, decency, even time itself. But wars have casualties, and in the end, Jerry Lee Lewis wasn't just fighting the world. He was fighting himself. And as his voice grew weaker, as his hands, once so quick and furious, on the piano keys began to tremble, the man who had defied everything finally had to face the one enemy he could never defeat, time itself.